Okay, so hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming, especially on a Wednesday afternoon. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri people who have been custodians of this land for thousands of years, and acknowledge and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and future. But before we go on, a few housekeeping things. So just letting you know that this panel is being recorded. So if you prefer your face not to turn up on the recording, please just turn off your cameras. The recording will be made available later and sent by email. Also, since there's quite a few of us, please keep your mics off during the session, except for the Q&A at the end. So for the Q&A at the end, you can start submitting your questions throughout the talk on Slido, which you can find the link in the chat. If Tracy, you could please put that in the chat. Or you can go on slido.com and then put in the code #123000. Or there's another option, and you can use this QR code here. Oops. There we go. You can use your phone, scan the QR code and pop in your questions. And so my name is Claudia, like the cloud. I'm an undergrad biotechnology student at Uni Melb. I'm involved in this initiative as the Entrepreneurship Director and Secretary, but tonight you're moderator for the panel. We've also got Tracy and Marion helping out behind the scenes. Thank you. And today's event is part of the University of Melbourne Alternative Protein Initiative, where our long-term vision is to build a healthy, sustainable, and just food system by creating a vibrant and robust community for alternative protein research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, starting from the University of Melbourne. So just going through the format of today. So today's format will be like, this is our initiative. Format today, 10 minutes intro. So this is the intro. We will have 15 minutes of the panelists' discussions, 20 minutes of a Q&A discussion, and 5-minute conclusion. So tonight you are going to hear from these 4 amazing panelists. And we've got Natalie from Brinc, Ben from Big Idea Ventures, that might come later, Alejandro from Fenn Foods, and Valerie from the Good Food Institute Asia Pacific, who we'll hear from in a few minutes. It's really exciting to have us all together to discuss the topic of entrepreneurship, business, and its place in the alternative protein world. So alternative proteins are meat, egg, or dairy products that are plant-based, cultivated, or fermentation derived. And this is one of the major solutions that will contribute to creating a sustainable and just food system. So I am going to stop sharing. Okay. All right. So this is how the panel is going to go. We're going to start off with some more general questions, and then we'll go into some speaker-specific questions. So let's get started. First question, a bit of a classic. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, what your company does, and a short summary of how you got to where you are today? So maybe let's start with Alejandro.
Okay, hi, how are you everyone? So a little bit about myself and the company. So I have, my background is, I've been working in kitchens for 15 years on some of the best restaurants in the world. And one day as a chef, I was a little bit frustrated to see that most of the plant-based options in the market were really low standard. So I decided to open the company. First, we started with sauces and plant-based cheeses. And then we went into plant-based meats. And we've been in business for 5 years. And now we have a factory, here in the Sunshine Coast. And we are distributing products in different retailers, doing some export, and yeah, growing well.
Awesome. So Valerie.
Hi everyone, so I'm Valerie and I am the Innovation Associate at Good Food Institute Asia Pacific, which is GFI APAC for short. And so in my role, I'm acting as the first point of contact at GFI APAC for alternative protein startups, investors, and accelerators. And I'm working on launching a GFI DS APAC community to connect the alt protein ecosystem together, as well as doing university outreach to start and support alternative protein student groups like the one at University of Melbourne. So just to share a bit more about GFI APAC, we are headquartered in Singapore, and we are Asia's leading alternative protein think tank. We are trying to help shift away from industrial animal agriculture, and we work on open access, science and tech research, corporate engagement, and policy advocacy. So a bit about how I got into this field. I kind of studied environmental studies in school, in university, and was always interested in kind of sustainability and issues regarding climate change. I've also been a vegetarian since I was young and cared about factory farming, farm animal welfare, and how we can kind of shift away from eating animals for food. And I've also been very involved in the tech sector, and I've been involved in a lot of technology startups and companies. So that was kind of my prior experience, and I was in an alt protein startup in the US as well. And then I've joined GFI kind of to support startups in this space.
Wow, that's a lot. That's so good. Natalie?
Great. Thanks for everyone for making the time to join today. I'm Natalie, and I am the program manager of the Food Technology Accelerator Program at Brinc. So a little bit about Brinc. We're a global venture capital and accelerator firm, investing and supporting entrepreneurs who are creating a more sustainable and equitable world. That is actually an investment thesis. And we currently invest in founders through our accelerator programs, one of which is within food tech. And for us, food tech means any technology to disrupt our food system and make our food system more sustainable, efficient, and of higher quality. So it's broad by design. And to date, I've led 50 plus investments within the agri-food tech space through Brinc in early stage companies, and have worked with startups across not only all protein and in cultured meat and plant-based and precision fermentation, but also in other areas like side stream validation and sustainable materials. Prior to that, my background actually was nothing to do with food tech at all. I started my career in much more traditional finance, and I studied politics and Spanish. So testament definitely to the fact that you don't need to have a technical background or anything to get involved in this space. And my own journey, I guess, is always that my parents and my family are in the restaurant industry. So I saw firsthand how food really brings people together, is a gateway into culture. And when you look at it as an industry rather than as a pleasure, you see the cracks in the system and see how much room for improvement there is. So that's where this intersection between food, tech, and sustainability comes in as a personal, both ambition for my career, but also personal interest.
Perfect. So I think both Valerie and Natalie, you sort of touched into the next question that we're going to go into, which is how you discovered alternative protein, or you got into the alternative protein space. Were there any key milestones, events, or pivotal thoughts that inspired you to enter the alt pro space? So I guess Alejandro.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Was it?
So,
sorry.
How did you discover or get into the alt pro space? So the alternative protein space, were there any key milestones, events, or experiences that inspired you to enter this industry, this particular industry?
So I think the main reason I got involved was, looking at climate change, and as a vegan myself, also, the repercussions it has on, at every level, from health to animals and environment. So that for me was kind of the the point where I thought I'd rather get involved on, helping this transition.
Mhm. Okay, beautiful. Valerie and Natalie.
I can share a bit. So basically for me, I think it came from the set. Oh, I mean, as someone who was vegetarian since I was younger, I think when I first found out about, and all my friends' family were not vegetarians. So when I first found out about, I think, Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, this was like 5-6 years ago when they were just starting out and had recently launched. I was really quite interested in them because I thought it was really innovative to create like meat that came from plants. So I thought it was a cool technology. And also, like, having studied environmental studies, I knew about the impact of food and agriculture, especially meat production, on that it has a very high carbon footprint, and it creates a lot of greenhouse gases. So that got me more interested in this space. So I started kind of just learning more about it. And, I did apply to a few different like alt protein companies, and I did manage to work in one in the US for a year. So that was kind of how I first got into the alt protein space.
Awesome. Yeah. Natalie?
Sure. I think my perspective actually coming into this space was a little bit different, whereas concerns around, animals and sustainability are very, very relevant. For me, it was actually more of a system or a needs-based analysis where we are a growing population. We're going to be almost 10 billion by 2050. And if you look at the way we currently produce our food, it just can't be scaled to meet those needs, right? So you're in an environment where you lose, depending on statistics, around a quarter or a third of all food produced. But at the same time, you have a lot of people who don't get enough food, and that number of people on the globe is just growing, right? And from an industry perspective, food is always going to be a core because everybody needs to eat. So from this fundamental standpoint, I think of access to healthy, nutritious food, and also a needs-based, industry-based perspective. That's how I first became interested in this space. And if you look at traditional meat and you look at some of the conversion ratios where, you need 100 times of resources to grow something like corn to feed fed cattle, which then loses a huge amount of energy in the process of us then eating cattle, that is not a very efficient conversion of energy. So looking at technology as the tool to reinvent that became much more interesting, because I personally don't believe that people are going to change their consumption habits solely on concerns of animal ethics or sustainability. You need to give them a product that's as good and tastes as good and is as inexpensive and is they want to eat and enjoy as much, because food ultimately is a sensory experience in order to create systemic change. So that was my standpoint actually for entering this space from a needs and a little bit more commercial angle.
Okay, awesome. So you're talking about like current trends in the market and our eating behaviors as well. So we'll skip over to the question about how all your roles in your companies mean that, you have to be aware of the current market, how the world is eating, and how our eating behaviors are affecting the current food system in terms of sustainability, instead of to create a just food system. So what would you say is the current trend in sort of protein consumption? For example, traditional meats versus alternative meat, or milk versus alternative milk, such as oat milk or soy milk. And on the same note, what changes have there been in the food technology space lately? So I'll hand this over to Valerie.
Yeah, so I think firstly, there has been the most exciting change is just the fact that there has over the past few years been a huge increase in interest, investment in this space, as well as the fact that we've really seen almost like an explosion of startups in the space. So just a few years prior, there may have been a few, and especially for the APAC region, just a few companies like in the plant-based space, and then subsequently quite a few cultivated meat companies showed up. And then there's also fermentation derived proteins. So we've really seen such a really big increase in the companies in the space. And of course, not all have like already commercially launched, but there have been some that have already launched commercially. And we see them in like quite a lot of restaurants across Asia. So I think that is something really exciting. We also think that there will be an increase in consumption. I think there was a report that there was a study released by IPSOS and DuPont Nutrition and Biosciences that has projected that by 2025, demand for plant-based meat is going to surge by 25%. And there might be even sharper increases of up to 200% in select markets like China and Thailand. So it's really encouraging to see that there seems to be projected rise in demand for this kind of products. So yeah, I do think it's a very exciting time, and I think that the industry will continue to grow.
And Alejandro?
Look, I can obviously talk from the industry we are, you know, the space we are working, which is plant-based meats at this point. And I think, you know, obviously the growth has been amazing in the last 3 years, but to really reach, you know, price parity with meat and to become, you know, and really make it mainstream, we need, we will need a few more years to reach to that point and really make the changes, you know, the major changes that we want to see. In terms of, you know, percentage, for what I can see in Australia, you know, and if we follow what the milk has been doing in the last 10 years, milk alternative when 10 years ago represented only 2% of the market, now is around 15 to 20. And we are in a similar space at the moment with meat alternatives, where we are probably, you know, 2 to 5%. So hopefully in the next 5 years, if all the research is being done and it really shows that we are heading to the right direction and we are going to be very similar to plant-based milks. And so, yeah, obviously the future is very looking good. We just need to keep working on making the products better and more affordable.
Yes. And Natalie?
Sure. Maybe I'll touch on some of the opportunities I see going forward, because I think one thing to note is that when you ask about alt protein, alt meat, or alt dairy, one thing to really remember is compared to conventional milk or meat, it's still such a small percentage, right? There's so much more of the market to penetrate. And this narrative where people say, hey, it's impossible against Beyond, or a lot of these plant-based milk or meat companies compared against each other, to a certain extent, of course, yes, but people also need to remember that there's a much larger market share to be won, where you also have to look at these alternatives against the conventional market. So I think that's one point to note. And in terms of opportunities and how I see this growth is, I think there is a lot of space in alt protein for plant-based protein that in that niche white space areas. When I say that, I mean, there are maybe more plant-based burgers now or plant-based chicken nuggets, but it's hard to find, for instance, with Fenn Foods, like real plant-based bacon analogs. Plant-based, sorry, I think there's a bit of a, can you hear me okay?
Yep, it is.
Yeah. Plant-based analogs that fit within Asian form factors, right? In noodles, in dumplings, plant-based seafood, or other opportunities are plant-based options that are really with a clean label and better for you and good for you, and not with a lot of artificial additives. And on the other end, I think a very exciting opportunity are hybrids, or solutions that are technically a bit more differentiated, using things like precision fermentation, or companies focus on cultured meat, but on a specific part of that supply chain. So serum-free media or scaffolding, where the industry is growing to the point where there is increasing specialization and B2B collaboration opportunities. So I think all of this points to the whole ecosystem becoming more sophisticated and maturing, and pointing to the fact that as a percentage of the conventional sector, it should also be growing as there's more, I guess, sophistication and specialization within the alt protein sector.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Natalie. That was really good. Now we'll move on to the next question about, so from the audience, we have lots of people that come from different career or academic backgrounds, for example, in science, management, commerce, arts, or alternative protein companies. So I know, Natalie, you mentioned this a bit before, but do you feel as if though you necessarily have to come from a science background to enter the alternative protein space? And what would be some benefits from having a scientific background? Or if not, how do you use your particular skills or experience to do well in the alt pro or food technology industry? Let's go, Valerie.
Yeah, so I think firstly, no, you do not necessarily need to have a science background because even in alt protein or food tech companies, there are a huge variety of roles, right? Be it in like marketing or sales, business development, human resources, customer support, operations. So all these are not roles that necessarily require a science degree. So I do think you can still enter this sector and there are job opportunities available. Of course, if you do have a science background, I also think it could be very beneficial because there is definitely a need for scientific talent for all these cultivated meat, plant-based meat companies. Like they do need food scientists, they do need people who have a biology or chemistry background. And I mean, you would definitely be very needed and sought after if you did have a science background, but you also don't need to have it if you want to enter this industry.
That's really good to hear. And let's go, Alejandro.
So, obviously I'm not a scientist, I'm a chef. And I think when we are talking about food, I think understanding what's good and what's not good and having a good palate is probably as necessary. You can, if you are talking about getting into the industry as an employee, obviously, any university degree will help you. But if you are talking about starting up, I would say if I had to start all over again and I was looking for a co-founder, I would probably try to line up with someone very strong on sales and marketing, because you can have the best product, but if no one knows you or you don't have the skills to scale up and no good understanding of how the retailers work, how the food service industry work, it's a bit hard. So I come from the restaurant industry, so I had a good understanding on food service, but then how to tell a story is probably as important as how good your product is. So you can be a marketer, you can be you can come from any area of the company and be a really good founder, even from HR or any. If you know how to build a team, you can. So you just need the drive and the passion, and then the rest you can hire, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like with alternative proteins, usually it's a very traditional do science and then do research, and then sort of you've got a great idea, but where do you go? Like if you can't communicate your science or communicate the products to the consumers who will be consuming the product of your research. And I think that's really important for our lots of business related jobs, commerce jobs, just a whole range. Natalie?
No, I would definitely agree with that. As I mentioned before, I don't have at all a science background. I stopped doing science when I was 16, actually. And going into this, I didn't actually even work in food or sustainability or anything related. I worked in real estate investment banking, then in venture capital, and in a family office, essentially. So food tech is going to be like any other industry where there's going to be talent needed across the spectrum. And actually, one of the most common pitfalls I see when working with founders is founders who are super technical, but who are unable to really lead a team and raise capital and communicate their story and all the things that we mentioned before. So I'd say the most important thing is really understanding where your blind spots and your weaknesses are. So finding the right people to complement that. So yeah, definitely, I think it's never too late to switch into it, and B, if you're passionate about it, you'll learn the basics and the technicalities, right? So you just need to understand it. You don't need to be able to do this, need to do the science yourself.
Yeah, awesome. So in the entrepreneurship and innovation, I guess, is never easy. I mean, I don't think it was ever meant to be. And AltPro is something that has a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation in it. So AltPro, being a newly discovered innovation, this is in comparison to many others, has its own challenges in the business and commercialization space. So what do you think are some challenges in bringing AltPro or sharing AltPro to the world? And how did you overcome them? Let's go, Alejandro.
I think it's very interesting because there is no not everything is being done on this space, right? So it's a massive blank canvas that we're still creating. And in fact, I feel like there will be a 2.0 version of everything that we are doing, because at the moment we still trying to, so the easiest way to get people to consume more plant-based products is to give them an alternative similar to what they were used to, right? So this is the quickest way to get the mainstream to shift from what they are eating to something new. Now, there will be a point where the aim won't be anymore, to replicate what's being eaten, because, probably my grandkids will never have beef or chicken or milk from a cow. Then the focus will be different. So instead of replicating something because it was done and it was consumed and it was easier to shift from from that to something similar to that, the focus will probably be around, I hope, more nutritious products, better for the environment. And this is not, I'm not talking only about nuts and pulses being better per se or more efficient than a cow. I'm talking about, if everything is soy, you need different crops to make a regenerative, agriculture. So it makes sense. So for every, I don't know, kilo of soy, you should be consuming another pulse that contributes. So the focus should be on the soil. So that will bring back. So what we eat should be at a bigger scale, should be connected to what the soil, the health of the soil will get. So if we are only eating almonds, that's not good for anyone. So if we are only eating, pea or soy or even the best grains, it's not enough. It has to be a little bit more holistic. So flavor will always be important, and obviously pricing, but hopefully it will change. It won't be only about replacing something that, people used to eat, because as I said, our grandkids won't even know what probably normal milk or normal meat tasted like.
Okay, awesome. So flavor and pricing. So those are the two major challenges that you can see right now. Natalie? Sorry.
I'd say you're talking about barriers for consumer acceptance, right?
We're talking,
is that the question?
More about like sort of what are the challenges in bringing AltPro or sharing AltPro in the world? It could be about perception.
Yeah, I think it's that. It's exactly what Alejandro mentioned, and that until something tastes as good or better, is as convenient, is as cheap, or as at the same price point, is as nutritious for you, it's hard to compete mainstream, right? So and I think one of the common criticisms of maybe the first generation of plant-based foods is that it's not very good for you. And I think that will be a key challenge and an opportunity going forward, is this continual iteration of products as we move forward. And that's, I think, on the plant-based side. On the cultured and the more technically driven side, there is still this perception of, hey, what am I eating, right? It's still a very new food. And a lot of people just see that as a tampering of nature, if you will. But I think that will just take time and consumer education, and over time, people will learn to accept it, if not from a wants basis, a needs basis.
Yeah. Okay. And Valerie?
Yeah, I think maybe I can share more from kind of like the startups. I mean, from the startups perspective, what are some challenges that they often face in trying to create and bring an odd protein product to market? So, I mean, of course, there's a technical challenge in terms of like, how do you create a product when it comes to plant-based meat? How do you create a product like and use the right ingredients and formulation such that it will taste as close as possible to a meat product? And then for kind of like the cultivated meat side, like how are you able to kind of, create use the cells to create cultivated meat that also, has the form factor, the taste of raw meat. And then there's also challenges about bringing the cost down so that it will be at a good price point that will be affordable and appealing to the consumer. And then there's, of course, questions about distributing their products out to the various markets. How can they get it into restaurants? How can they get it into supermarkets? And how can they get consumers to adopt it? And then there's also questions about regulation, especially for cultivated meat. How do you bypass, or like how do you overcome all the regulatory challenges in getting your product approved in the various countries that you want to launch your product in? So these are just kind of there's of course many different challenges. So these are a few of the categories that the startups might face.
Thank you, Valerie. We'll move on to some specific speaker questions. So the first one will be for Natalie, because you specifically at Brinc contribute to alternative proteins in the accelerator and venture capital area. From working in this area, you probably get to see like a lot of startups, early stage and emerging alt-pro or food technology companies. So let's say I'm a student, I am a student, but let's just say I'm a student and or someone who'd like to start an alt-pro company. For you to choose to mentor, accelerate, or fund a company, what are some particular metrics? For example, strong pitches, business plans, or viable prototypes, or other things you look for within a company that show that it has sort of like a potential for high growth, or how you select the companies that you want to mentor or help fund?
Of course. So we make our decision-making process through a few filters. I think one thing to note is as an early stage, it's never as simple as just looking at evaluation or revenue projections, because quite often these are pre-market companies. But so a few key things we look for are really in the point of differentiation or the value proposition of this company compared to its peers. Is it really offering something different, or does it really have some form of an unfair advantage that will allow them to compete against their competitors? That's number one. Number two, I think, is the team. Actually, in early stage, so many things can change. The most important thing is finding great founders who are receptive and who are able to see their blind spots and who are gritty. So even if there are necessary changes along the way, they'll be able to adapt and survive. Number three, I think, yes, we always look at, technical progress, previous fundraising, any commercial tractions, or any LOI signed, or revenue made. But most importantly, I think, is whether or not they're actually solving a problem that needs to be solved. Be amazed how many pitches we see. There's a beautiful product or solution, but it doesn't actually, it solves something that doesn't really need to be addressed. So I think those are the things, like thesis alignment and whether it truly can make a fundamental impact. And then also the composition of the team. And then also how it's really different from what's existing on the market right now.
Okay, yeah, but sorry, not that. I just wanted to know if, would you take on companies with sort of the same ideas or products, or would you be worried they'd become competitors? Or do you aim to sort of take different ones to maintain a diverse portfolio? Yeah.
So we have founders who are creating when you say the same product, I mean, plant-based milk is one category, plant-based meat is the same category, but each product needs to have some form of differentiation. So I'll give you an example. We've recently invested in a company called Good Food Tech, which is doing plant-based meat based in Hong Kong. And on the face of it, yes, there's so many versions of plant-based meat, but what they specialize in is their plant-based fat, which they've patented called Aromax, which really enables them to bind their product together and apply their product in things like plant-based dim sum, right, and plant-based noodles. So even though it's plant-based meat, and we have at least almost 10 investments within this category, each one will have their unique point of differentiation. Same thing with milk, right? So we've invested in a lot of different alt dairy companies, but each one will have an unfair advantage, whether it's technical or something we see in the team, or a commercial alignment that's advantageous. But no, there's more than, it's the industry as such an early stage, you back more than one horse, and it's not a zero-sum game where there's definitely room for more than one player to grow.
Okay, that's good to know. And from the companies that you've either rejected or are currently working with, what have you noticed is like the biggest barrier to launching alternative protein products into our global market?
Biggest barrier, I mean, it's an increasingly saturated space. So I think the one most important thing, actually going back to the founder, is grittiness, right? This ability to persevere. And I think now quite important barrier is technical, right? It's a little bit too late in the game to just launch another, I'd say, not plant-based burger with no point of differentiation. So what makes your product different? Is it healthier? Do you have the mouth feel down better? Are you able to get extrusion right so the texture is right? Is it clean label and you don't use methylcellulose? Is it healthier for you, right? So those are some of the technical points of differentiation and barriers or moats that we see to make a deciding factor as to whether or not we invest or not.
Perfect. Would you be able to explain a little bit more about what a clean food label is?
Sorry, yeah, it's a bit of a, I think, catch-all term, but for me, I think I go for a rule of thumb where if you understand everything on the label, then that's probably a good sign. So where something doesn't have a lot of artificial preservatives and something is made with a relatively simple ingredient list is, I think, an increasing trend within the plant-based space.
Okay, perfect. I think those are some really insightful answers into the accelerated world of alt-pro and food tech. But now we'll move on to some specific questions for Alejandro. So Alejandro is trained as a chef and specializes in plant-based cuisines. Now he has a company called Fenn Foods. So my first question would be, how did you come up or hone your ideas for your business Fenn Foods?
With new ideas or with the current ideas we have? I mean, with the current products.
Oh, it can be both. So how did you come up with Fenn Foods in general and then your products in Fenn Foods?
So yeah, Fenn Food, we come up basically seeing the lack of Australian-made products. So we decided to launch I think we were one of the first plant-based meat producer here in Australia. And then for any new products, we used to look at what we thought it was needed, and products that we felt that, okay, we developed this, we believe it's a really good product, so let's just launch this product. Now we change a little bit, and we have done market research, and basically our marketing department tell us what to develop. So we know chicken is the biggest seller in the retailers here in Australia. So we decided to put all our energy on chicken products, from nuggets, burgers, tenders, etc. And moving forward, that's basically our approach. There is a mix between, we have these sessions where we discuss projects, but then we want the facts and the research behind to say, okay, is this a big enough opportunity? Then we take it on board and we start developing. If it's not, then we leave it for later, or we don't proceed.
So I guess that goes into the next question of, because I guess for a product to be successful, you would need to know that there's a demand for it in the market. For example, for your alternative protein product. So what kind of market research did you do before creating Fenn Foods to ensure that there is a market for it, or even during the creation and feedback from the market during the early stages of your company, or as you were revising your products?
Yeah, no, at the very beginning, we didn't have a budget to do a proper market research, which will cost, between 10 to 20, $30,000. So we started basically by looking what was around. Obviously Beyond was already on the market, and we thought we could do something similar here in Australia. So the whole point of plant-based products, I think, is big part is the sustainability aspect. So if we have an Australian option, also the Australian market is really focused on consuming Australian products. So that's basically, there was no a proper market research. It was more like, okay, there's a wave of products coming, there is nothing in the market made locally, so we thought, this is a good opportunity. Now we became a little bit more sophisticated when launching products, and it's not just reactive. We sit down, the R&D team with marketing, sales, and then we all together have a session, and then we move forward.
Okay, perfect. So what would you say makes your company different then, and stands out from the other alternative protein companies?
I think, and this bring me back to your question before about if you need to be a food scientist to launch a company, a plant-based meat company, let's say. When I see different companies in the market launching products, and I've been recently in Expo West, and everyone was launching chicken. The same here in Australia in the Melbourne Expo, and I walk around and I tried all the chicken products on the market, and even if they are all working in different, they all have their own R&D or space, or the approach is very similar. And it's amazing because companies in America are doing really similar products to companies here in Australia and Hong Kong. And when I compare to the product that we launched, we are about to launch in retail, but we already launched in food service. The product is very different, and I think it comes back to how you approach the problem. So I'm a chef, so all the R&D, even if we have 2 food scientists in the team, in our R&D team, the approach, we follow procedures, and we have more of a steps that we follow, but still very culinary based. So when I try all the different plant-based chicken in the market, I find that to me, it feels like it's not food. It feels, I'm not a fan of, most plant-based products in general. And when, I think it has to have a very particular mouthfeel, and it has to be, especially with this chicken product I've been working for a long time, it really needs to hit certain, aspects. And, I can very confidently say that our product is probably the best on the market, and why, if we don't have the budget that, most companies have, but I think it's the approach on how you come out with the product.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's really good to hear, because I think you can easily come up with like all protein products and things, but it's especially, you have a unique background in being a chef, so you know a lot about flavor and how to create flavors that people will want to consume and buy more. Like I'd want to buy more of your bacon because it tastes really good from Fenn Foods. So I think that's fantastic. So when you made your company, did you have a strong founding team or a co-founder? Were you able to find a co-founder? And if you did, how important was it to have a strong co-founder?
Look, the company was kind of a side hustle, while I was working as a chef. So I opened it, by myself and my wife, and she wasn't, in this industry at all. She was a nail artist. So basically it was the two of us. We didn't know anything we didn't even know what a pallet was, or that absolutely no idea of, food at that scale. So I think obviously very different background to most plant-based meat companies. But we had one thing that kept us going, which was, we were really passionate and both, I think, very strong in personalities, and we didn't want to give up. And there is a lot of that. I think one key thing is the resilience. There will be so many more plant-based meat companies popping in the next few years, but there will be probably in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be a reduction, and only a few will last, long, and then, yeah, the difference will be just, keep working hard and making sure that you make the right decisions on who you bring to your team. And if you really want to take things to the next level, yeah, make sure that you build the right team.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point.
To your question, co-founder, it was my wife, but obviously if I can give a bit of advice to someone who's looking to start, I would say trusting your co-founder is key, and make sure that you complement. If you are both of you, on the same area, probably I will bring a third one that is probably strong on other areas. As Natalie said, you need to understand what you're not good at. We brought recently a CEO into the company, and I was the CEO until now, but I realized, there is not time for me to, there is people out there who've been running, big companies, and really understand, how to commercialize a product. I'm very good at, developing products. So yeah, I didn't mind to step aside and get someone to run the company for me to focus on what I'm good at.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so it's about bringing the right people, the people you trust, people who complement your skills. And bigger is not necessarily better. Having a big team is usually hard to manage. So having a few people at the beginning who you can trust and work well with, I think, is really important. We'll move on to Valerie. So thank you, Alejandro. Valerie, is from Good Food Institute, APAC, a nonprofit organization, and she does community building, university outreach, and supporting startups and investor in the alternative protein space. So my first question would be, you're involved with mentoring and working with a lot of universities, so such as UniMelb. So what do you think other roles universities can play or are playing in building the new generation of entrepreneurs in the alt-pro space?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think universities are definitely, they play a very, very important role. The most importantly being creating a very robust talent pipeline that can drive the future talent pool for the alt protein industry. So basically when we start from university to like educate students to pursue research or pursue degrees that are useful for food technology. So maybe kind of starting research projects with professors in this field, or maybe starting to do internships in alt protein startups and companies. It's kind of creating that talent pool that can then join the industry when they graduate. The other thing is that universities are also an area that you can do a lot of research in this area, and it's kind of like open access. It doesn't have to be like commercial stage, so you can do a lot of exploratory projects to figure out how to create new technologies for cultivated meat or fermentation derived proteins. So that's another area that universities are very important in, and also just in terms of like raising awareness among the student body to educate them about this sector, to educate them about the opportunities, so that they can either be future consumers or contributors in this space. So definitely, like, there is a very high need for talent to grow this industry, and we do think that universities are a very strong pool for that talent.
Right. So like in the same context of universities, the term alternative proteins may not be familiar enough yet in the wider sort of like university student community. So how has the consumer perception of alt protein been in universities and companies so far? Like, has it been mixed, and how do you think this perception can be shifted?
Right, yeah. I wouldn't say like GFI has necessarily done surveys or like found out what is the acceptance rate or the awareness of alternative proteins amongst university students. But I do think that, I mean, in general, alternative protein is coming up in the news more, and I do think more and more students being more educated are starting to be aware of the existence. But of course, having either professors or by studying student groups like yours and promoting that awareness among students, that's a really key step to take so that we can increase more awareness and acceptance of students towards alternative protein. And amongst companies, we do see a lot of the big multinational corporations taking an interest in this space. They're looking to either develop their own products in alternative protein, or to partner with existing startups and collaborate to distribute or even acquire some of these startups as well. So I do think that bigger food companies are also starting to be aware of this sector and seeing how they can get involved too.
Yeah. So you work with universities, but also companies. So GFI supports startups, investors, and partners in the alt-pro space. So how exactly does GFI do that, and what would be the difference between GFI, APAC, and other accelerator or VC firms?
Yeah, so I mean, something that helps GFI kind of stand out from other organizations is that we are working to amplify the entire protein sector. So we're quite agnostic, as in we just want to help the entire industry as a whole. So we don't focus on only a few companies or only a few segments, and we try to be quite broad-based and provide support to all different kinds of companies in this space. And the three areas that we provide support to this industry are, firstly, in terms of science and tech, kind of helping to accelerate open access research and to increase funding and create like more research projects in this space. So to that end, we do have like a new research grants like we give out grants for research, and we just launched that very recently. So that's something we work on. So on the science and tech front. The second front we help on is policy, in terms of working with a lot of government agencies, international organizations, ministries, to advocate for better regulation for alternative protein, to make it more friendly, and for the government to provide more support, and to convince governments that they should put in funding, or they should pour in resources to help grow this sector. And then thirdly, we have a corporate engagement department, which is the one that I'm in. And that's where we kind of partner with startups, accelerators, investors across the globe, to drive further investment, to help to, connect people with each other, to increase partnerships in the sector, and to provide any advice, any resources, any reports that we can to the different players in the space.
Beautiful. I've got one last question for you. It is quite similar, but at an initiative like the Unimelb Alt Pro has one of its main focuses on building and expanding the Alt Pro community, similar to GFI's goals, but starting from a local scale at uni. So can you describe what community building looks like and the importance of community building in the Alt Pro industry?
Yeah, so community building, I think, comes from, there can be many aspects of community building. One, of course, is kind of, having events that can raise awareness, or educate more people, where you invite experts over to speak, is a form of community building. And then also seeing how you can connect and matchmake or introduce people to each other is another kind of community building, as well as creating programs that would be supportive for the alt protein industry. That's another way you can contribute to community building. Of course, there's a lot of others, but this is just some examples. And I do think that's, for example, Singapore is quite a good example of how community building can really help the entire industry. So the Singapore government is, and many different organizations in Singapore are quite supportive of alt protein. So including the Future Ready Food Safety Hub, the Bioprocessing Technology Institute in Singapore, and the Singapore Food Story R&D program. And there's a lot of other different kinds of and A-Star, which is the kind of scientific research arm of the Singapore government, has also been very supportive of alt protein. And because of all these different organizations, providing that support, Singapore has become a very attractive hub for a lot of overseas alt protein startups to expand here, as well as for alt protein startups locally to really be set up, and to set up the operations. So I think that when you have all these community building efforts, you can make the area you're in become a very attractive hub. And there's economies of scale and network effects that can really boost the success of all the different startups, because they can help each other, they can share knowledge amongst each other, and create partnerships that will further their development.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, I think that's all we have on the dot. That's all the time we have today for our panel. Thank you so much, Natalie, Valerie, and Fenn Foods. And Alejandro. So I reckon we've got a few questions in Slido. So I'll share my screen. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Yes. Okay, so first question is, how would you make alternative protein products affordable for everyone to buy at the supermarket? Who wants to take this question? Maybe Natalie?
Sure, actually, well, I'm not an operator, so actually maybe Alejandro might be a little bit more well suited to answer this question, but I think with any business, it's around unit economics and scalability. I would say though, right now, I think consumers are willing to pay a premium, given if you look at the average prices of even Impossible and Beyond, they're more expensive than your conventional burger or ground meat. So I think affordable is dependent also on things like branding and market positioning, right? But yeah, with any business, it's really around control of the business cost, input, OPEX, and scalability. But maybe I'll pass on to Alejandro. He might have more hands-on experience on this one.
Look, in my opinion, I think we are getting closer and closer. Obviously, it's all about economy of scale. Imagine, the meat industry has been getting sharper and sharper over many years. If we have to start all over again, imagine the price of normal milk and alternative milks. Growing an animal to then get the animal pregnant to get milk is insane. How it's not more economical, plant-based milks compared to, and you can apply that to every other alternative product. But I think it's a matter of time. It will happen. But and we are working very hard. I think every company is working very hard to get more affordable.
And our second question, the top question it's to Natalie. Natalie, I'm curious to how you've been working at Brinc. What skills did you carry over from working at a family office that were valuable to your current job?
Great. So I think actually for me, I've been at Brinc for 3.5 years now, and especially in Asia, that was a time when the alt protein industry was still very nascent. So I actually met my current boss at a conference where I volunteered at then it was Future Food Summit in Hong Kong, which was actually the first probably Asia-based industry event speaking about the future of food. And it was very much a natural interest. So I reached out to people locally to be like, hey, I was also involved in a few like urban farming initiatives, got involved in this conference and met my boss. But I'd say the most valuable skill set prior to this, when I was in the family office VC, I was less on the investment side, more troubleshooting for their existing investments. So I acted as an interim CEO for an ag tech startup in Australia, actually, really on the ground, speaking to partners, building out models. And so that I say hands-on experience really gives me an insight in what are successes, pitfalls, areas to avoid, areas where entrepreneurs really need support. And then from my more investment banking experience, I'd say actually it's less the technical skills, it's more skills in learning how to navigate a company, how to communicate, how to manage expectations, manage timelines, all those soft skills that are required in any role. And at Brinc, it's been really exciting to see this industry grow. But given that I had no background in it, I've really grown with it. So I spent a lot of time reading. GFI is a great source for a lot of open source research and really teaching myself and asking people when I don't understand the technical concepts. And so it's all possible. Go out, meet people, attend conferences, help out where you can. It's not necessarily a linear path, but it's definitely all possible.
Valerie, we have a very popular question for you. 9 people liked it. So for Valerie, are there any non-technical internship or volunteer opportunities at GFI?
Yeah, I mean, great to see many people who are interested in kind of volunteering or interning. As of now, we don't exactly have like current open positions, but I would say, I mean, just feel free to reach out to me, ValerieP@gfi.org, and I will be able, I can check with our team to see if there might be any future internship or volunteer opportunities. Just share a bit about your background, and then we can see if there's something that we can involve you in. So yeah, just feel free to reach out. Although we don't have any current urgent internship opportunities open right now, but we're open to involving you in the future.
The next question is, what non-technical jobs can you do in the alt-pro space? So I guess non-technical as in non-scientific related. Non-science, sorry.
Maybe I can jump in here. So I think with all companies, you really need someone who understands the core operations of a business. So operations types roles, marketing type roles, finance or fundraising type roles, investor relation type roles. They're all, I mean, everything other than really product development and processes. It's all non-technical, and a lot of that you see in alternative protein companies, a lot coming from CBG big companies or traditional food companies that are definitely don't have technical experience.
And Alejandro, a specific question is, how has your experience on this entrepreneurship journey been? I'm curious about your ideation process as well as scaling up production.
Oof, it's been a hell of a journey. Really, you know, I think the one thing being an entrepreneur and getting hit by COVID is that you have to, you know, by the time COVID hit us, 90% of our business was based on food service. So we were, you know, and we just moved to a new, larger facility. So I think resilience is very important. And what's the ideation process? So at the moment, as I mentioned before, we have a little bit more of a structure when it comes to which new products we're working on, and you know, obviously it takes in consideration the sales department, which is talking all the time with the retailers, then marketing, knowing as a, you know, as a global, okay, what's the size of the opportunity, you know, what it would mean for us if we are successful on that specific sector. But when it's all, let's say, agreed, I think as a base for me, you know, once I know exactly, okay, we are gonna look into, let's say, chicken or cured meats, or is how do I, with these new products that we are developing, how do we get something that is better, unique, and different? You know, and is it the ingredients that we are using, is the technique, and then while we are looking at that, are we going to, you know, manufacture ourselves? Are we going to look to contract manufacture by someone else? You know, obviously there is a lot of experience now in the team to make a very good and informed decision. We are not guessing anymore. So yeah, that's part of the evolution.
Beautiful. And then we've got one more question, not one more, we've got a few more. How do you think we can get more students involved in alternative protein entrepreneurship? So I guess, Valerie?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one is kind of like having the student groups is really helpful, right? Because they can get involved with the different projects and team up together for alternative protein. But I think, I mean, firstly, having kind of talks by entrepreneurs where they can learn about how these other entrepreneurs started their alt protein startups, I think would be useful for students. And then of course they can, I mean, I think Brinc or Big Idea Ventures or a lot of other accelerators can also help to provide mentorship and support for students who want to start a startup in this field. And then of course, maybe they could also do internships first in the startups and then just see how the operations are like, how the organization runs. And then that is kind of a really good insight into how this kind of alternative protein startups work. And then with that internship experience, they will kind of have an idea of how they could start their own startup in the future.
And our next question is, what is the average pre-seed funding amount for alt-pro startups? I feel like that's very specific to Natalie.
Yeah, so through our programs, we invest a fixed ticket size of $130,000 US into each of the companies that we accept. But of course, this is different per company, per firm, per investor. So I think it really depends on the situation.
Very specific to the company. Latest question, Natalie, is differentiation in alt-pro possible? Reading papers, I feel that safety is the most important thing consumers are really interested about.
No, I definitely agree. Food safety is of utmost importance, right? It's something that you eat. When I mean differentiation, I think I mean technical differentiation and how you maybe get to your final product. So I think, as Alejandro mentioned, like each company will have a slightly different approach, slightly different, R&D process, different ingredient stack, maybe a moat in the fact that if you're a cultivated meat company, you create your serum a little bit differently, or you have a more efficient way of optimizing cell lines. And that's what makes you more competitive against your peers. That's what I mean. But at the end of the day, of course, your final product has to adhere to food safety standards.
The next question is, how likely are startups to take on student interns?
I mean, I know our startups are always looking for interns. Brinc is always looking for interns. I'm sure Alejandro is looking for interns too.
Yeah, we are the same. We had a few interns in the past. So yeah, I think the easiest way is to reach out, and most likely any startup will be happy to take on internships. Yeah, interns, sorry.
And then it says, keep it up, Alejandro, your work is very inspiring. So what do you think is the best strategy for alt protein companies to take to be successful in the market? For example, taste, nutrition, cost, luxury, or convenience, or how different it is, how novel it is?
Would that be for me? Sorry.
Yeah, Alejandro, you can answer.
Yeah, I think the question is kind of, it will depend on the company. If you are looking to be a mainstream, low cost, plant-based meat brand or manufacturer, that will be your strategy, the way you are going around this. There is obviously a market for it, and then if you are looking into more of a premium product or more of it's like conventional meats, there will be brands that are really cheap and really mainstream that probably are really successful, and then there will be brands and that want to do something a little bit more special or different. Yeah.
Okay. And just while we're on you, what goals do you want to achieve in the future, like expanding? What are some new products you guys are working on?
So short term, we are obviously really focused on chicken products, but moving forward, anything that we can do better, different, and unique, it will be, within the space we are working, but being different in terms of the ingredient we use, or different in the way we achieve a result in a specific texture or a specific flavor. And yeah, I think there is so much still that we can do. I know it seems like it's already over, really crowded, but I wouldn't, for anyone up there, I would say there's always room for someone who's coming up with something better, good, and it has a point of different that is really, that you really believe that will make the consumers happy. Would you consume it? That's the first thing. There is a really, are you passionate about what you're looking at, and make sure that before doing anything and before launching anything, that you do your homework, and otherwise you probably love it and your friends love it, but yeah, you need a bit more than that.
Yeah. Okay. And we've got two more questions, one for Natalie and one for Valerie. So Valerie, how are cultivated proteins and fermentation derived proteins made?
Okay, though it's quite a long explanation, but if I could kind of summarize it. So for cultivated proteins, basically it starts out with taking cells from animals, cells from animals, and then growing that in cell culture media for it to grow further. And then depending on the type of cell, it can grow into muscle or fat that will become cultivated meat. So that's just like a very, very brief description, but of course there's more technical explanations that you can find at GFI's website. For fermentation, basically you're using you could use like fungi or yeast to grow the kind of proteins that can be used to create meat in the future. So this is my very short explanation, but I would say go to GFI's website to like read the more detailed explanation.
Maybe Marion or Tracy can put in GFI websites, or Fenn Foods and Brinc as well. So Natalie, one last question. What are some success stories since starting Brinc? Maybe your top success story at Brinc.
I don't think we're allowed to have favorites. So we have, I think, 40, 50 portfolio companies, but I would say one success is we've launched our program in Greater China. So enabling a growth of a very exciting ecosystem. We will shortly be looking at other markets like Brazil. So I think a huge passion of mine as well as the company is to see how we can further the alt protein and food tech ecosystems in more developing or nascent ecosystems. So those would be two successes. And I would really encourage you to check out our portfolio on our website if you haven't already. There's some really, really cool companies. And also don't hesitate to get in touch if we can ever be of help or if you have an idea for business.
I'm just looking at the time and I reckon we'll wrap it up here. It's been an amazing and a very inspiring panel. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to both the speakers and all of you that have taken the time out of your busy schedules to be here today. Speakers, we've learned so much from you. Your experience, advice, and knowledge that you shared today is definitely something that we can take away from today. Everyone, round of applause for our speakers. So if you enjoyed today's event and you're a student that wants to get involved, here are some ways. I'll just show you on the screen right here. Whoops, nope. Sharing my screen here. Can you see? Yep. Here we go. You can scan the QR code with your phone. You can sign up as a member at Unimelb Alt Pro, join our committee, join our journal club. And our next one, we're going to be discussing plant-based meat and how hard it is to mimic the colors of meat. You can also join our Alt Pro curriculum campaign where we're working with subject coordinators and lecturers to include Alt Pro into our sort of university curriculum. You can follow our Linktree, Insta, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Yeah, so I guess we want to say we'll formally close this session today. Thank you so much again to the speakers.